By now, almost everyone is familiar with the name of Professor Jordan Peterson. For the few who have not heard yet of this professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, here's a capsule introduction. Jordan Peterson testified before the Canadian Senate about the criminal wrongness of Bill C-16. Government-forced speech, he said, is simply wrong. C-16 passed anyway. Jordan Peterson refused, in spite of the Ontario government's malicious human rights regulations, to use the idiotic pronouns je and je, or to apply the plural pronouns they and them to single individuals. After 20 years as a recognized and tenured professor whose research had merited government funding every year, he suddenly became famous for his defense of free speech, and so his $100,000 research funding was cut off. Ezra Levant of the Rebel crowd-funded replacement funds, and the public responded with $200,000. Already the author of a book widely recognized in his profession, Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, Jordan Peterson then became an overnight sensation. Camille Paglia calls him the most important and influential Canadian thinker since Marshall McLuhan. His newest book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, rocketed to #1 on the Amazon lists in Canada, the US, and the UK in the very week it was released. I want to read to you just 2 paragraphs from that excellent and entertaining book, because they apply especially well to some of our present concerns about government-enforced thought and speech, and the official prohibition on discussion once the social justice warriors of the radical left have rendered their opinion. Here's what Professor Peterson says in a chapter on child rearing. Writing about the Rousseauian idea that natural man is perfect but society has corrupted us, and that children are therefore to be regarded as blank slates upon which an evil society writes its corruptions, he asks, if society is corrupt but not the individuals within it, then where did the corruption originate? How is it propagated? It's a one-sided, deeply ideological theory. He might have said idiotic, not just ideological. But I digress. Back to Jordan Peterson. Even more problematic is the insistence, logically stemming from this presumption of social corruption, that all individual problems, no matter how rare, must be solved by cultural restructuring. Our society faces the increasing call to deconstruct its stabilizing traditions, including smaller and smaller numbers of people who do not or will not fit into the categories on which even our perceptions are based. This is not a good thing. Each person's private trouble cannot be solved by a social revolution, because revolutions are destabilizing and dangerous. We have learned to live together and organize our complex societies slowly and incrementally over vast stretches of time, and we do not understand with sufficient exactitude how what we are doing works. Thus, altering our ways of social being carelessly in the name of some ideological shibboleth, diversity springs to mind, is likely to produce far more trouble than good, given the suffering that even small revolutions generally produce. Does that seem to you to apply to any of the social upheaval we're experiencing today? No matter how many social justice warriors advocate this never-ending transformation of the existing social order, and no matter how many foreign billionaires pour funds into the campaign, and no matter what well-coiffed prime ministers declare their chronological chauvinism because it's 2016 or 17 or 18. The resulting destabilization is going to hurt not just a lot of people, especially the children, but society as a whole. And because of the damage it will do to our children, the cultural mutilation is likely to last for generations if we acquiesce. It's interesting to hear Jean-Jacques Rousseau cited as the authority for this philosophy of the noble savage, because Rousseau's ideas about education undergird virtually all modern educational theory. Rousseau put his ideas, which, by the way, included using sexual liberty as a lever to motivate the young, into a book entitled Émile, The Education of a Young Man. Émile wasn't a textbook, it was a novel, but all of Rousseau's ideas about education were in there. Education, he told us, should not pour ideas into the mind of a child, but instead draw out of the child what nature had already put in his heart. Never mind that the Bible tells us that rebellion is bound up in the heart of a child, and that loving discipline must drive it out to save the child. Now, Rousseau himself had 5 children, all illegitimate, but he didn't educate them himself. Indeed, he didn't even acknowledge them or feed them. He put them into foundling homes where they starved and died. But Rousseau did educate one young man. His name was Maximilien Robespierre. Yes, the author of The Reign of Terror during the French Revolution. It's been said that we learn from history that we don't learn from history. If we were more willing to study the past, we might be able to anticipate what is being done to us in the present and thus prevent a similar catastrophe in our own future. Mr. Peterson talks about the attitudes that will help find the path, wrote Peggy Noonan for the Wall Street Journal. She went on, it's not a politically correct or approved path, but it is an intensely practical and yet heightened one. It says, this life you're living has meaning. I heartily recommend this book, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. The social justice warriors will hate it. Thus we know it must embody a lot of truth. They hate truth. That's the way I see it.